the fact that you have doors which open this way, not that way, the fact that you have a kitchen in this specific place. All these functionalities come to life, and their true purpose is only revealed when man is living in this house. The same thing. The world only has a true purpose once you live in it and you fulfill your mission. You see, the word world in Hebrew, olam, is the same root and the same word as the word he'elem, which means concealment. The world is beautiful, is gorgeous. We have a beautiful world. Actually, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon himself, calls this world God's garden. And God says, Bati legani achoti kala. I came to my garden. The Midrash says, what is this garden? Don't read the word garden simply, but again a play on words. Gnuni. Don't read garden, but read gnuni. The word gnuni could be translated in many ways. But the true meaning of gnuni is my pleasure. This is the place of my pleasure. This is the place where God meets man and man meets God in this world. Now what happens is that this world has a purpose. The purpose of this world is to be elevated. The purpose of this world, truthfully, deeply, is to reveal God. But in order to be able to reveal God and to give existence to man, you have to first have a concealment of God. Let me explain. For a second, if you don't mind, we're going to go into a concept which is a little difficult to understand, but which will make us understand how much God is in this world and in our reality and in ourselves. What is higher, darkness or light? Chassidut, Hasidic, Jewish, Chabad philosophy asks this question. We say, Yotzer O, you form light, Uvore Choshech, and you create darkness. We know that God's light, God's emanation, descended from level to level, and there's the world of emanation. After the world of emanation, there was the world of creation. Under that, or lower than that, you have the world of formation. And lower than that, you have the world of action. We find that the world of creation, which is the potential of creation, is higher than the world of formation, which is already more limiting, and higher than the world of action, which is even more limiting. What does it say? You form light and you create darkness, which means darkness is at a higher level than light. What does that mean? That darkness is at a higher level than light. To understand this, let me ask you, when you have an emotion, when you have a feeling inside of your heart, when you have an idea in your mind, is it more infinite when it's in your mind and your heart? Or is it more infinite when you express it? Obviously, it's more infinite in your mind. In your mind, you can reshape it the way you want. You can express it with hundreds of expressions. The intensity of the feeling that you have in your heart is something that even with a multitude of words, you would never be able to express. And therefore, expression, in our case, light, revelation is more limited than what's hidden, what is potential. This world hides the presence of God. But in that world, you actually have the essence of God. Now you're going to ask me, what do you mean? You have the essence of God in this world. How did God create the world? Of course, he created it with speech. We all know this. But the God created the world, it says in Latin, we use an expression called ex nihilo, from nothing to something. In the 1700s, there was a mathematician, a French mathematician by the name of Lavoisier. And he said in French, rien ne se perd, rien ne se gagne, tout se transforme. Nothing is gained, nothing is lost, everything is transformed. Meaning that man in this world creates absolutely nothing. Man is only there to transform something from something to something. I had before a log of wood, it now became a table. It's not that I created the table the same way the log of wood was independent before and did not need me to exist, so too the table, after it's been created by me, transformed by me, does not need me. Creation from nothing to something, that is only something which is godly. What is the difference between what we create, transform, and what God creates? What we do is just a transformation, and therefore does not need us. And therefore the table can continue existing even after I left it. I left the room. On the other hand, the world is created from nothing to something. God actively, every moment, every instant, every second, recreates the world from nothing to something. Imagine for a second, you go to Orlando. I remember when I was 9 years old, my parents took me to Orlando, and we put the funny glasses, and I saw children running in the field. I remember myself trying to catch the children. I saw these kids, these 3D kids, running in the field. But as soon as I took my glasses, the image wasn't so clear anymore. And if for 1 second the projector would stop, the whole image would disappear. That whole reality would be a non-existent reality. This is, I believe, a good parable to express something which is beyond our understanding. God recreates the world every moment, which means that he puts his essence in this world. But being that God creates the world with speech, and we said before that speech is already limited, it means that this world is a limited world. It's a world where God's essence is concealed. But God, in his might and kindness, gives us the possibility to have a relationship with him in this world. You see, we have something called the soul. So the soul is very, very interesting. The soul, on one hand, is a part of God, is an integral part of God. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God Almighty, blows a breath of life inside of us, and that is a part of God. But that soul, before it comes into the body, as elevated as it is, cannot reach the levels that it could reach when it's inside a physical body. Do you know why? For the simple reason that in the supernal realms, a soul is not really living, is not able to grasp the essence of God. It's only able to grasp the ray of the shine of Hashem. In a physical body, it's able to grasp the essence. What is the essence of God? What does it express itself through? It expresses itself through Torah. Why do us Jews study Torah the whole time? Because the Alter Rebbe says in chapter 47 of Tanya, our inheritance and gift that God gave us is that He gave us the Torah, and inside the Torah there is the will of God, the wisdom of God, the essence of God, the depth of God. It's as if God gave us Himself. When we study Torah, at that moment, we are connecting to the essence of God. But we cannot study Torah if we don't have a physical brain and a physical heart and lips to be able to express these words of Torah. God puts His light and His wisdom and His essence in the Torah, and He asks that in order for us to connect to Him, we should study, and at the same time, we should do His commandments. I'm going to give you a parable to make you explain why it's so important to have a physical body, and why it's important to live in the physical body in order to be able to connect to God. Imagine you like a good steak, a good, juicy, hot steak on the grill. Can you take it with your bare hands? Absolutely not. You're going to get burnt. You need to take gloves, special gloves, which are fire resistant, or a tool, which is coarse, which makes that you don't feel the heat. But through this tool, you're able to grasp the actual food. Without this tool, you can smell it, you could see it, but you cannot grasp it. Our physical envelope is that glove that permits the soul to connect to God by being able to fulfill God's will. So when we study Torah, at that moment, we are connecting our physical mind with God. But who benefits from this? The soul. Besides the mind, the physical body, the soul benefits of this. And the moment you're attached to God's wisdom and God's will, you understand that you're walking above the world. Meaning that you are not caught in the world, but you now understand that the whole physicality and all the pleasures of this world and this whole physicality is for the purpose of being elevated. Bishvili nivra olam, the world, the concealment was created for me. What is my guide to reveal that concealment and to reveal the purpose of the world? That's the Torah. And that's why it's important, and that's why over generations, since we got the Torah, and even before that, since Abraham, our forefather, we have never stopped studying Torah. The Torah permits us to connect to a higher understanding, a higher reality. Or should I say, the true reality of the world. Our challenge as Jews is that we are in a physical body, but we are asked not to live and to act like all those who do not have the Torah. Those who don't have the Torah, the only reality they have is eating, drinking, working, pleasures of this world, more pleasures of this world, more enjoyment of this world, and more enjoyment of this world. Our purpose is a completely different purpose. Our purpose is not to become enslaved to the world, but actually take the world and take our physicality and become a master over our physical bodies, our drive, our animalistic drive, to the extent that animalistic drive is going to propel our souls to another level altogether. And that's what Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon says, V'rov tvuot bekoach shor. If you want to accumulate a lot of harvest, a man cannot plow, sow, harvest his field by himself. He needs an ox. An ox might be very coarse, but it's very powerful. And when the man is able to dominate the ox and direct it in the right direction, what a man would be able to do, the ox is able to multiply by 100 or 200. The soul by itself is like the man. If it doesn't have the physical body with that drive that pushes it, it will never get anywhere. And therefore, that push that we have that pushes us is actually to our benefit. It's there for us to reveal our soul, to reveal our purpose, and to become a master over the world. Which world? The Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer says that the whole universe is one big man. And man is a small universe. Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon says, Kigam et haolam natan belibam, says the whole world was put in our heart. So basically what happens is the following. When we connect to Torah, and we now connect to the path of God, our vision is transformed. We look at the world no longer as a purpose in itself. We understand that it's concealing something which is a deeper purpose. Once we connect to that deeper purpose, we reveal the true power of the world. We reveal our true power. And at that moment, we make a home for God. We make that home, which we spoke about before, with all its functionalities, we make Hashem actually become the king of the world. Not that he wasn't before. We are the ones that are going to reveal it. And we live at a higher purpose. Now, you see what happens. When I was 10 or 11 years old, my parents used to take me to my uncle. We used to go on vacation to a place called Atlantic City. And my uncle of blessed memory used to have a little motel. In the olden days, when somebody would call to reach a room in the motel, there was what we call a switchboard. And you had somebody which was the switchboard operator. The switchboard looked like one big board with a bunch of holes and wires coming out. And another board with a bunch of holes. And I used to love as a kid, when I was 10 years old, as soon as I would get there, I wanted to work on the switchboard. Yes, room 210, I would pull out the wire, plug it, like this, make this connection between the person in Arkansas that's calling this person in Atlantic City in his motel room 210 or 315, and be the one that's going to make this connection. Every single one of us is God's switchboard operator. Each time we fulfill his will, which means we understand that the purpose in me drinking a glass of water is in order to reveal the spark of godliness which is hidden in this water and connect that to God. Each time I put on my tefillin, I light my Shabbat candles if I'm a woman, and I do any type of mitzvah, I'm actually making these connections, just like a person, when he repeats certain actions, creates neural connection in his brain. We create spiritual neural connections. We are God's switchboard operators. Now, the physicality of the world is divided in different sections. There are the things that we can elevate. Certain foods which are kosher, the Torah tells us exactly this is the pathway. There are things the Torah tells us stay away from it. The way to elevate it is by not dealing with it, by you overcoming the portion the pulsions and the desires that pull you and push you to in that direction. And then there's the domain of holiness. Holiness is once we connect things to a higher purpose. Now, it's possible for us, God says, to become holy. Let me share with you a story. There was once an individual that died some 30 or 40 years after he passed away. The Poles in Poland wanted to make a railroad track through the Jewish cemetery. So they did. And at the moment that they did, they had to deter all the bodies which were buried. To their surprise, there was a body of a Jew in this Jewish cemetery that was dressed like a bishop, and the body for the last 40 years was not affected at all. It was intact. Everybody was wondering, what is the story of this body? How is it possible that after death a body still looks alive? So what happened is that they went to the eldest person of the city, which recounted the following story. This man was what we call a Gabbai Tzedakah. Gabbai Tzedakah, the Gabbai Tzedakah, the role of the Gabbai is somebody that gathers funds, collects funds for people of the community which are in need of alms, of whatever. A lady turned to the Gabbai and said, my daughter is getting married, I'm a widow, and we found this great match, but we need a certain sum of money. He said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I went to everybody already, they're sick and tired, they don't want to hear from me. And she begged him, and he decided to go to a very wealthy man. The wealthy man saw him at his door and said, what are you doing here? You know, I told you no more. He says, please, it's for a widow, a daughter, and then she's getting married. He said, okay, you know what? If you are willing to dress like a bishop and put a broom between your legs and make a fool out of yourself in the whole city, I'll give you the 10,000 rubles or whatever you need. And that's what he did. Now you can imagine everybody thought that this man went crazy. For being a tzedakah collector with a great reputation here, he's walking around the city, kids are making fun of him. He completely embarrassed himself. He came home, he hung this bishop's garment in the closet, and he continued on with his life till one day, a great tzaddik by the name of Rav Yisrael of Ruzhin, which lived about 160 years ago, 180 years ago, knocked at his door. He said, you're the Gabbai Tzedakah. Yes. He says, can I come in? He says, wow. Yes, of course. Very, very holy rabbi. He says, can you please open that closet? He said, no. He says, please open the closet. Don't be ashamed. And he opened the closet. And what did he see in the closet? He saw this garment of a bishop. The man, the Gabbai, started trembling. He says, tell me the story. Tell me the story. And Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin starts smelling the clothing and kisses it and smells it. He says, tell me the story. And he tells him the story. He says, you have to know that on this garment, there's the odor of Gan Eden, of the Garden of Eden, of paradise. When you die, you should wear this garment. And you will be protected. And that's exactly what happened. When we do mitzvot, it's not only that we're sanctifying this world, we are sanctifying our bodies. To the extent where every part, every fiber of our being is becoming holy. Very holy. Actually, I just saw a letter where somebody writes to the Rebbe, I don't understand how in the 6-day war there were such incredible miracles when the Jews which fought the war, most of them were not observant Jews. So the Rebbe's answer was that, first of all, you have to know in the laws of kings and their wars, in Maimonides, it says that it's a mitzvah to go to war to protect the land of Israel and the people of Israel. So all of these soldiers were performing a mitzvah. As we said before, they were God's switchboard operator. And they took this mitzvah and they connected to the mitzvah of going to war. It's one of the 613 commandments. And it says that Aosek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. When a person is busy and immersed in doing a mitzvah, he is absolved from doing all other mitzvot. And therefore, at that moment, they became one with God in such a way that they attained the level of tzaddik gamur, complete righteous Jew. The presence of God fills them up from their head to toe. And therefore, of course, they're going to experience miracles. God is going to war. They're completely immersed, and besides that, they're protecting all of their brothers and sisters. To go and put your life in danger for somebody else, there's no greater mitzvah than that. Now we can understand that it's not given to everyone to be so holy at that level. There are tzaddikim, like for example, the Talmud speaks about Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, and speaks about Yaakov Avinu. And they said, Yaakov Avinu lo met. Yaakov Avinu did not die. And Moshe Rabbeinu did not die. What does that mean? It means that you get to such a level of connection with God that it's possible that you're so immersed in holiness, your physicality has now been completely transformed. Just like we know what it says concerning the flame. The flame says God. It says in Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon says that the soul of man is God's flame. The body is like the wick. The soul is like the flame. The mitzvot and what we do is like the oil. Eventually what happens is that the fire, when it's worked and when the oil is pure, then the fire is able to take the wick and actually transform slowly but surely that wick and burn it. By a tzaddik, by somebody that's a tzaddik, a righteous Jew, a holy Jew that's never sinned. The flame is so great that it permeates the physicality and transforms it into something of a spiritual nature. That's why in the Talmud of Sanhedrin it talks about Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was the author of the Mishnah. I think it's in page 98 or 97, I forgot, at the bottom of the page over there. And it talks about him coming to make kiddush. He used to bless the wine and make the kiddush on Friday night for his family, even after he passed away. These, of course, are things that for us, we don't understand anything. But there's a level of such a tzaddik, that's the optimum. We're talking about what's called tzaddik yesod olam. Tzaddikim like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we don't understand exactly that reality of righteousness where every fiber of their being is literally a chariot for God's presence. But all of us should aim towards that. And how do we aim towards that? By working on ourselves. By connecting every part of our being. Just like we have 248 positive commandments, we have 248 limbs. Just like we have 365 negative commandments, we have 365 sinews. Hulach yafa rayati umumen bach. Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon says in the Song of Songs, you are completely beautiful, my beloved one, and you have no blemish. It's talking about the soul. The soul in the body, invested in the body, is able to perform all the mitzvot. Each time you do a mitzvah, there's another part of you which is shining and alive. Concerning the Ari HaKadosh, the great Kabbalist, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria Ashkenazi, which is buried in Tzfat, it says that he was able to see on the forehead of an individual the mitzvah that he just did. And if the mitzvah was done with fervor, with joy, and with intention, then the letters would shine on the forehead. And if it wasn't, then the letters would be smaller. Sometimes, if it was not done the right way, the letters would be upside down. Which means that there's an expression of a mitzvah. Actually, in Reshit Chochmah, it brings down that one day, two rabbis were walking and they saw a gentleman that was on his donkey. And they said, what mitzvah did you do? They saw a beam of light over his head. They asked him, what did you do? The man was embarrassed. He said, nothing. He said, please tell us. And he said, I was almost about to sin with a woman, and in the last minute I decided not to sin, I ran away. He says, you have to know at that moment you brought a tremendous light upon yourself. And that's actually what the Rebbe says in his first discourse. He brings the words of the Zohar, Kadit kafya sitra achara istale kekara de kucha berechu. When one breaks his nature, at that moment, he actually makes space, a vacuum effect that draws down a level of light which is so supernal, so elevated, that the world can't contain it. Which means that through our actions, we are able to affect the world and reveal godliness in the world. Not only through our actions, but even through our not doing. When I resist temptation, I break my nature. At that moment, I'm able to tap in to something much higher. And that's why a home needs to be a couple. That's why lo tov heyot adam levado. It's not good for man to live by himself. Because by himself, man might be conceited. But when he lives with a spouse, then he has a magnifying mirror in front of him showing him what he needs to repair, what he needs to elevate. And once you understand that in your relationships, then you're going to be elevated in your connection, not only in your relationship, but you're going to become more refined in order to be able to have the true relationship with God. Now, we know that every word in the Torah is true. The Torah has the oral Torah, and there is the written Torah. The written Torah is the Bible the way we see it. That's the simple explanation. But really, the Torah by itself, without the rabbis, is a book which is sealed, which you cannot understand anything. Because when the Torah says, for example, you will write these words on the side of your door, al mezuzot betecha uvisharecha, and at your gates. What words? What side? Where? On what? With what ink? Where do you know all this from? Moses, when he was at the mountain, during the daytime he would study the written Torah, And at night he would study the oral Torah, which was given orally from generation to generation. You see, God did not want that what the nations of the world did by retranslating over 260 languages the Bible and falsifying information, that the same thing should happen to the oral Torah. So for generations, till Rabbi Yehuda Nasi came, the Torah, the oral Torah, was not able to be written. It was transmitted from Moses. And Maimonides actually, in his introduction, explains how for 40 generations, and he mentions the rabbis and the students and the rabbis and the students, for 40 generations still the Mishnah was written. Till the Talmud afterwards was written, how it got transmitted from one to the other. And that's how we know the explanation that a mezuzah, it has to be on parchment, it has to be the first two chapters of the Shema, it has to be exactly on the right side, and all these details, because it comes together. It was eventually written because people were losing the tradition. So of course we know that every word of the Torah is true. And God expressed himself through the rabbis, because as we said before, these rabbis, they were all holy people. Our sages teach us that the smallest tanazutcha shebaychu mechayemeti, the smallest of the authors of the Mishnah, which is the basis of the oral Torah, was able to bring the dead back to life. That's the level of holiness they had. And God used these channels just like Moses was that connecting channel to God to give us the Torah. And therefore, every word in the Torah is true. Even though you have various opinions, and sometimes opposite opinions. But God is infinite. And therefore, it's true that when it comes to the law, the final law, it might not be like this opinion or that opinion. But in the law, you have the will of Hashem. And therefore, these rabbis, which were so connected to the will of Hashem, through them, we were able to get what the Torah is today. And what it has always been. And through us connecting to the oral Torah and to the written Torah, we connect to God. Now the Torah, just like you have the oral and the written Torah, which are the body of the Torah, there is the soul of the Torah. The soul of the Torah is the secrets of Torah. Like the Zohar, Kabbalah, Chassidut, Chassidic philosophy, and the purpose of Chassidut is to actually connect us at the level of the soul. That we should be able to be permeated with meaning, with a spiritual connection. Not only do the physical action, but actually have that spiritual connection with God. And by doing so, we prepare the world to the spiritual reality there will be when Mashiach reveals himself. Because the ultimate purpose of all this that we are doing now, doing Torah and mitzvot, using the physical, not doing like others do to be so quote-unquote spiritual by not getting married, or by going to mountains and disconnecting from the physical. 99% of our mitzvot, of our commandments that we have in the Torah are physical. Because the purpose is not to shy away from physicality, but become a master over our own personal physicality. How do we do that? By changing, reframing the way we think, and growing by studying Torah and doing mitzvot and connecting everything we do, even our business, even our way of speaking, what we look at, what we hear, what we speak, what we eat. All of these things make that our vessel, the vessel for our soul, should be elevated, and the world should be elevated. When Mashiach comes, that veil, which is the world, which was what we started our class with, will be taken away. And we'll be able to see the real truth about things. So imagine for a second somebody that goes away from his house and he's in the forest and he sees a bunch of stones. He's never seen stones like this, and he starts filling his bag with the stones, and then he realizes it's a little heavy and he needs to go up the mountain to go back home. So he empties the bag and he's left only with a few stones in his pocket. He finally gets home and his kids wake him up and tell him, "Daddy, we're rich, we're wealthy. These stones you brought really have great value. We'll be able to live for the next year with no worries." They're laughing, they're dancing, and he's crying. Why is he crying? He said, "You think I'm wealthy? If I would have known that these stones, which were heavy, were actually precious stones, I would have had the courage and the strength to carry much more." This is what the verse says. Bifchi yavo, when Mashiach will reveal himself, when God will finally take the veil away from the world, the concealment away, and we will see the truth. At that moment, we will realize that every effort we did, the mitzvot, the positive and negative commandments, everything we've done, the extra study of Torah, this has a tremendous value. And then we'll cry and say, "Wow, I could have done so much more." But it's not too late. That's what teshuvah is all about. Teshuvah, return, is not repenting, it's return. I'm returning and reclaiming my true identity as a Jew. Who am I as a Jew? I'm a part of God in this physical world. And in this garden, in this world, I'm able to transform the world, and I'm able to elevate my soul to the greatest heights. And that's what we see that Abraham, the first of Jews, did. It says, "Asara nisyonot nitnasa Avraham ve'amad bekulam." Avraham Avinu was challenged 10 times. And what does it say? It doesn't say that he overcame the challenges and the tests. It says that he stood through every test. I always had that question. What is this expression of our sages? You stand through a test, you overcome a test. You see, what happens is when people are challenged, they get hit, like hit again, and then you see them carry the weight of all their challenges. I've been hit. Avraham Avinu was hit. He decided, I'm going to focus more in on what my mission is. I'm going to stand more straight, upright, and I'm going to be even more focused and continue. This is not going to break me, it's going to make me who I am. And therefore, all the suffering and everything that we are going through is actually to put us at a level where we connect to our true identity and we are determined and stand steadfast throughout all of them. When we start respecting ourselves, then the nations of the world respect us. But the moment that we are weak in the trust we have to consider what others say about us and how to please and how to succumb to peer pressure, we will end up nowhere. We're going the same circle. We're not making this connections with God at the true level. And that's why a Jew is able to accomplish anything and everything. You know, they say the story of this person that had a lot of troubles and tribulations, and he decided, Ravida of Parich explains to us, he decided that to go out in the forest. He had a lot of debts, and in the forest he hears a music, beautiful music. And this melody and this music takes him and just takes him away from his problem. Eventually, he falls asleep. When he wakes up, the music is gone. He goes back home, and as he's getting closer to home, it's going back closer to reality. The problems become heavier again. And suddenly you have this person, he is seeking, where's that music? Where can I hear that music? And he goes to his playlist, and he hears this music, and he's seeking that music that brought him comfort and gave him hope, a sense of escape. Till one day, he goes to a store and he hears, I don't know, some music that he doesn't like, maybe heavy metal, maybe Pink Floyd, AC/DC, or whatever. And in the middle of a song, he hears 30 seconds that remind him the song that he heard. So he buys the CD. Play, rewind, rewind, play, rewind, rewind, play. He's sick of doing that. Eventually he listens to the whole song. Eventually he listens to the whole CD. Eventually he forgets why he bought the CD to start with. This, Rav Hillel Parishus tells us, is the story of our soul. The soul lived the highest level of wealth, of spirituality, of connection, of bonding, of elevation, and now it's been sent to a physical body. In Miami, in Australia, in Cape Town, in Chiapas, Mexico, or in Madrid. And now it has all these types of desires that have nothing to do with the soul. It sees the external world, and there's so many things. There's the iPhone 14, and there is other things which I won't speak about, and so many things on the internet, and it's just caught up in the flow of the mind, in some type of exile, and it's yearning. So one thinks, you know what, if I'm going to be very wealthy, that will bring me peace of mind. If I'm going to be in the mafia, that will bring, if I smoke drugs and try this and that will bring me peace of mind. If I go to, and like this, that's why you see that everywhere there is any movement of anything, there's a Jew behind it. Why? Because the Jew is by nature never satisfied till you find Torah. Once you find Torah, it's very scary. One of the Hasidic masters, I thought you would think it was Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, said that the Torah is like a lamppost. The further you are from it, the bigger you see yourself. As soon as you're under it, you don't see yourself anymore. But that's when you come home. And when you come home, at that moment you really found the right music. All the pleasures of this world, they're very nice. But we know the nature of pleasure. Pleasure becomes an addiction, and eventually it becomes your enslavement. You become enslaved to the pleasures of this world. And the more enslaved you are to the pleasures, eventually you're not satisfied with what's permitted. You do things which are not permitted. And then you go to the next thing. We see what's happening in the world. What yesterday, 50 years ago, was an abomination, today is open and it's all right. Yesterday, whatever drugs were not permitted, today are already legalized. Everything is acceptable. Therefore, God says, you want to make a house for me in this world? Itkafia. Break your nature. But how can you break your nature when you're not connected above? To connect yourself above, you have to study consistently. You have to connect, keep that connection. You can't imagine having a cell phone that battery is always on 6%. You need to fill it up. You can't imagine driving a Tesla and knowing that at any moment you're not even close to a charging station and the battery might die in the middle of the highway. So, this world, the purpose of this world is you. You can make that difference. clue to the story about Mashiach. There's a group of French people that went to 770 to see the Rebbe. Amongst them, there's a young French man, Jewish man, that decided to join in the crowd. Now this young man, or this older man, whatever he is, however old he was, had a whole book of proofs that he is Moshiach, he is the Messiah. He spoke to Rabbi Groner, the Rebbe's secretary, and asked that he should please give him a private audience with the Rebbe. Since the man only spoke French, right? Since the man only spoke French, what happened? They asked Rabbi Melul to stand at the door, and the door would be slightly open, so like this, if he goes out of line, we would know to take him out of the room, or whatever it is. The man is sitting in front of the Rebbe. And he tells the Rebbe, the whole discussion, everything is good. Then he tells the Rebbe, you know, I am Mashiach, and I have all the proofs that I am. The Rebbe's face became very serious, and he turned to the man and said, do you keep kosher? He said, no, I don't keep kosher. He says, how could you be Mashiach if you don't keep kosher? So he asked the Rebbe, if I keep kosher, will you believe that I am Mashiach? So at this moment, the Rebbe said, do you keep Shabbat? He says, no, I don't keep Shabbat. He says, and if I do, will you believe that I am Mashiach? The Rebbe tells him, do you put on tefillin every day? He says, no, I don't. But Rebbe, if I put on tefillin every day, I keep Shabbat and I keep kosher, will you believe that I am Mashiach? The Rebbe said, start doing these three things, come back to me in a year, and then we'll discuss what else you can do. Every single one of us has a spark of Mashiach inside of us. When we break our nature, when we do something to better the world and to better ourselves and to connect to God and to make the world connect to God, when we feel that responsibility of being God's switchboard operator, making these spiritual connections with the world, through the study of Torah and through doing mitzvot, and especially in these last moments, and we realize that these stones, which are sometimes heavy for us to carry, these mitzvot, are really precious stones. At that moment, we become that light of Mashiach in the world, and we can transform the world and make it really what it was created for. And then we could say, the world was created for me. The concealment was created for me to reveal God and to show that the concealment was only an illusion. And really the essence of God is right here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I think I answered everybody's question except the questions on evolution. The question on evolution, I will just tell you, it's a very simple answer. Darwin's theory of evolution, yes.
Doesn't Chassidus, yes, believe in evolution?
What?
Doesn't Chassidus believe in some sort of aspect?
So I'm gonna explain. That's what I mean. That's what you asked the question. No, you asked the question. But we evolved to him asking the question. So evolution doesn't. No. So what happens is that there was a process which is called carbon-14. Carbon-14, basically, you take an object, a bone, and you put it under certain severe conditions. You put it under, a certain condition for a certain period of time, a year or two, whatever it is, and you put certain acids on it. And you see how it deteriorates in 1 year. You take a bone that is completely deteriorated, like something that they found in the archaeology, and you make you say, if this took a year in order to deteriorate this much, and now this bone that we found deteriorates so much, it would take about 1,000,000 years for this bone to deteriorate. Now this is all good and fine if you consider that there wasn't anything that happened, but we know that with water, salty water, how much, imagine salty hot water. Imagine salty hot water that has some sparks of fire inside of it. You can imagine that things are going to, in a much faster way. What they say would take 1,000,000 years could actually be done in 40 days of a flood, for example. So before the Mabul itself, the flood that happened at the time of Noach, right, could have caused this disintegration, right, and this making things older in a much faster time. So their way of examining things is not good. There's somebody in London that said that he discovered in his backyard a body of a man that is 10,000 years old. It was exposed in the museum for 2 years. And then he came out and said that he basically took a body of a dead man that was just buried for 10 years or for a year, and he basically did a bunch of, used different types of acids to make things faster, and that's how they believe it was 10,000 years, which shows how weak that whole theory is. Besides that, in the Zohar Kadosh it says that before the Mabul, all the animals and everything that existed was super giant. That's why the Rebbe's father says in an explanation, when the Zohar, when it says that 2 rabbis were walking in the street and they saw a big giant, like something like of a dinosaur, bones of a dinosaur. So they said, Tuyua! Tuyua! Tuyua is an expression of, wow, like, how is that possible? The Rebbe's father explained, the Rebbe was a big kid Kabbalist, says, don't read Tuyua, read Tohu. Tohu means the world of chaos. Before the Mabul, before the flood of Noach, everything was at the level of chaos. That's a whole discussion by itself, meaning that it was a level where the light was tremendous and everything was created was giant.
Were the people giant too?
People were big.
Did they shrunk?
Huh?
They shrunk over time?
Did they shrink over time? No, what happened is after the Mabul, the whole world, the whole order of the world was recreated. The Sforno explains that there were no seasons before I sneezed. There were no seasons. No, there was no seasons before. And the earth was straight. The axle of the earth was not like this, it was straight. And therefore all the world was getting equally the light of the sun, in a way that there was tropical weather everywhere. After it says in the Parashat Noach, afterwards it talks about seasons. The seasons happen. So the question is, where did the surplus of water go? It went to the poles. And now that the axle and that there's less heat on the north and south pole, that's where the water went and froze. Basically, that's what this Sforno says. Anyways, so I think I answered all the questions. I even spoke about the couples. Is there any questions I did not answer?
About the Chazir.
Huh?
The Chazir coming back.
So the Chazir, that was the first question.
Yeah. So I.
So first of all, not all the opinions agree with that. That the Chazir will become kosher. It's not that it's going to become actually kosher.
Right.
It's going to do tshuva. It's going to return, but itself becoming kosher. I saw an explanation that it says it's not actually going to completely become kosher.
Yeah. I guess so. So there is actually a list from Moses to Joshua and so on. There's
absolutely all the way down to the Mishnah.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
And then, so my question is, how is it that if, let's say, so Moses got the oral Torah
And the written Torah.
right on Mount Sinai. Why is it that I have some way that I can see it happening, but why is it that, you know, in the Talmud it's just a bunch of different opinions? Why isn't it, if it was passed down from generation to generation, why is it that there's rabbis disagreeing? Because shouldn't there just be one thing, like it was said, this is what you do, and then why is there disagreement?
So there's two things. We have the Shulchan Aruch, which is the conclusion, because what happens is like this. Let me ask you, what does God want more from you in your relationship with Him? Does He want you to know what He wants or to search for what He wants?
I'd imagine search.
So you see, we have what's called the Shulchan Aruch. The code of Jewish law is actually the will of God. It's what He wants. We know exactly this is what He wants. The Talmud, which is the process of how do we get to that conclusion of what He wants, is searching for what He wants. That's why we have the Talmud. The Talmud is that process, which basically what happens is that eventually it says a verse, "B'machashakim oshivani Hashem kemete olam." I think it's chapter 139 in Tehillim. It says that God brought me back from the darkness and put me in the darkness. This is, and our sages say, this refers to the Talmud of Babylonia. What happens is that God, eventually, as the laws got lost, the Chachamim, the sages, were given 13 principles of study to be able to extract the law from the different verses. Each one from the house of wherever he came, or the country wherever he came, learned it in a different way. At the end, the law and what God wants is what we have as law. But the process to get there, the fact that we have to go through the process, just like in order to be able to give birth, you have 9 months of pregnancy, right? Just like in order to be able to go to Mashiach, you have to go through this exile and this process of challenges. Just like if you want to make a muscle, you want to rip the muscle in order to be able to build a higher, stronger muscles, right? Right, you ripped. No, and you understand what I'm saying? I'm not. So the story is the same thing. A part of God's will is that there should be so many opinions. Meaning that saying that there's only one way to be able to get to God's will is saying that God is limited. A part of God's infinity is the fact that He's able to be in all these different opinions. Any other questions?
But so going back to Noah, so the people, Noah's generation was big people.
They were big people.
So they shrunk over time?
What?
They must have shrunk over time, meaning...
Well, first of all, everybody died.
No, I mean Noah and his family, and his lineage, he must have shrunk over time, because they had those big people genes, right? So you're saying they...
So you're saying because of the genes.
You know what I'm saying?
No, I understand what you're saying. You're saying, so basically, if they were so big, you see that God Himself made that the life of man after Noah should be 120 years, no more than that.
That's the age. I'm not talking about...
I know, but when we talk about the age, it's everything. It's a whole package deal.
So Noah said, let's say, Noah descendants that were not alive at the time of the Mabul, they would live to maximum 20, even though their parents or grandparents would live to 800 years.
Correct.
So I see. So then, therefore, if they were the kids that were maxed out at 120, they couldn't reach the physical potential that their descendants could.
Most probably.
Okay.
Most probably. Any? Yes.
Just some wondering.
What's your name?
Nasser.
What?
Gazinski.
Huh?
Gazinski.
Oh, you're the Rabbi Gazinski's son.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's it called? How do you make sense of the devotion between and the connection between a chassid and a rebbe? That the craziness that a chassid has about a rebbe, meaning that how he's so devoted to him and why he's totally willing to do anything for him, and how could it be that a person right, is going to do that to a man. So when we have to do that to Hashem, it just seems a little bit confusing. So.
When you cut your toenail, too small toenail, too short, and it hurts you, who feels the pain the most? Your toenail or your head?
What do you mean by that?
It's going to be the head. The head is going to feel the toenail.
That's where I'm aware of it.
Because that's really where you're aware of it. The Alter Rebbe says in chapter 52 in Tanya, 51, that if God is everywhere, why do we need to go to the temple in Jerusalem? He says, he gives the analogy of the head versus the whole body. The soul is one soul, and it shines in the body in every part the same way. But obviously the sensitivity there is in the brain is a much higher level of sensitivity that there is in the foot. And therefore, in the brain, that's where the soul is felt the most. The brain of the world is Jerusalem. A Rebbe is Rabbi Rosh Bnei Israel, is the head of the Jewish people. And therefore, the same way a person is connected to his life force, or to the channel through which his life force is going to come, right? That's how a person is connected to a Rebbe. Because the Rebbe is, at the same time, that magnifying mirror that shows you really where you can go, who you truly are at your essence, and is your true head.
Yeah, but even though that's like your connection, isn't it? When you read the Torah and it's that you say Yechi, well, after the Torah reading, isn't that placing whoever you're saying that phrase at a higher realm than the actual Torah itself?
There's a mitzvah which is called mitzvat minui melech. It says som tasim alecha melech. It says you have a commandment to appoint over you a king. One of the purposes of having a physical king is because we don't have that vision of being able to see a spiritual king. So by understanding royalty and monarchy and accepting upon ourselves the king, we understand God, and therefore, and we glorify Hashem at the same time, because Hashem is the one. Just like you accept Moses as being the prophet, right? The person that says that Moses is not a prophet, or he said something of his own, he doesn't believe in the whole Torah. So suddenly, what are you saying? You're saying that believing in Moses is greater than the Torah. You understand? Everything that's in the Torah is Moses said it. You're accepting, basically, the acceptance of a king is not it's not higher than the Torah. You're just declaring it. You have to declare it at that moment or another moment. I'm not saying there's a specific moment that you have to do it.
So I'm saying I feel like that moment is disrespectful to the Torah and to the great people in the Torah.
Maybe the opposite, because it's a moment, since the Torah told you itself that you have to appoint a king. Would you say it's disrespectful to put on a talis when you go up to the Torah, because you're giving importance to the talis? I'm just saying, is that you're just doing
those go in accord with each other. They go hand in hand. There's no like issue or power imbalance. But when you're saying, when you have an aliyah, and say it's a parsha where Moshe is mentioned or Avraham is mentioned, and after you read these great biblical stories with these people that are way above our understanding, and all of a sudden you're saying this passage about a person who
is Mashiach a person or God?
Mashiach is a person.
So, and if the Torah tells you that if you don't believe or wait for Mashiach, you're a non-believer in the whole Torah, and you, by saying that you accept Mashiach as your king, am I being recorded?
Doesn't have to be. Okay, go. You're free.
Nisman. One second, you're cutting this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Before you send it.
Yeah. It's good to hear anyway.
No, it's okay. I'm just okay. I don't want you to blackmail me.
No.
No, I'm just joking. I mean to say, Maimonides says that if you don't believe in Mashiach or wait for him, you don't believe in the whole Torah.
Okay, get that.
So in what contradiction? If I would stand right there and I would say, Ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema beviat HaMashiach, I would say this in front of the Torah.
The problem is with the key lines referencing one particular person.
You don't have to say it, but you could say somebody else. If you believe that if
But
you
isn't that line referencing that one particular person?
You could.
first of all,
That phone also comes.
thank you. First of all,
That's Hashem
first
saying
of
no.
all, just so you know,
I don't think he wants to be recorded.
it's okay. I'm good for the recording. First of all, it says in the Talmud of Sanhedrin on page 98.